Hello, welcome to Four Wheels and a Seat. I'm Alex Dalrymple and this is my channel where I review new cars every week. You know the drill. If you haven't hit subscribe already, please hit it down below. Give me a like if you enjoy the video and don't forget the notification bell too. That would be great. Thank you. Cars don't get much more basic than an entry-level Mazda2, but having said that, it's a Mazda, so you know, it's still pretty loaded with gear. The Mazda2 has just had a bit of a facelift. Let's check it out. This version of the Mazda2 has been with us for almost 10 years, and this facelift is, well, pretty subtle. The biggest difference you're going to notice is at the front of the car, where the front grille has been made a little bit more narrow, and in this entry-level pure version has now been sort of half blocked off with a smooth piece of plastic, and I think it actually looks really good, better than some of the upper spec models in fact. And there's also just a little bit of color there with this little sort of hexagon of yellow. It's like a little lemon wedge that's been jammed in the front. There's another one at the back as well. They don't actually do anything, but they look nice. From the side, the two looks pretty much the same. It's a really small car with small wheels. They're 15 inches in this entry-level pure model. They do get a little bit bigger as you move up the range. And interestingly, the rear brakes are drums, and I didn't even know that that was still a thing. The rear of the two looks pretty much the same. It does look a bit dated, to be honest. It's not ugly though, it's just old. The boot is pretty small at just 250 litres, but I moved house this week and I actually managed to get an entire small bookshelf in the back of this car with the rear seats down. So it is actually somewhat practical. I should have taken some video of it, I just didn't think of it at the time. Under the bonnet sits a 1.5 litre four-cylinder naturally aspirated petrol engine that outputs 82 kilowatts of power and 144 newton meters of torque. Those aren't big numbers, but this is a small car and it's more than enough for it to feel quite zippy when you're driving it around town. And having a manual transmission makes it a lot of fun to drive too, especially when you're going around a bend like this and you can drop down a gear and really throw it into this corner. It's feeling pretty good. Fuel economy is a very frugal 5.4 litres per 100 kilometres on a combined cycle. There is also an automatic version available of this car. I wouldn't recommend that though. It would feel pretty sluggish, I'd imagine. The interior design of the Mazda2 looks kind of like a slightly shrunken down MX-5. The design is very similar, although materials-wise, it's all fantastic plastic in its hardest and scratchiest form. The center console screen is pretty small at 7 inches and it runs the old MZD software that we saw in the Mazda6 a couple of weeks ago. Here it doesn't feel quite as out of place as it does in that car, simply because this is a smaller car. And it's perfectly adequate. It does what you need it to do. There's no native navigation. That can be added on at extra cost, however. But there is Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, although both are wired. And like all Mazda systems, it can only operate in touch mode when the car is at a stop or traveling at very low speed. Otherwise, you're using the jog wheel down the lower console. The air conditioning, and notice I said air conditioning and not climate control, is pretty old school. It's got 3 big dials there that anyone who's driven a car in the last 30 odd years would be well familiar with. It's pretty straightforward and uncomplicated to use. We've got storage space for your phone plus 2 USB-A ports and a 12-volt outlet. There is an SD card port there if you have native navigation installed. That's where the SD card for it would live. There's no over-the-air updates in this car. The manual transmission actually feels really good, and like a lot of Mazda manuals, it is exceptionally easy to use. It has a nice high friction point with the clutch, and it feels nice and sort of notchy, and the throws aren't too long. Mazda pretty much do this better than just about anybody else, I think. We've got the jog wheel for the center screen, volume control, couple of cup holders, and this car, being an entry-level pure, has no armrest here, which I really hate not having, but you can add it at extra cost, or I think it actually comes as standard in some of the upper spec models. Upper spec models also get a head-up display, which this one doesn't get, and the instrument cluster here is pretty basic. We've got a big analog dial in the center there for your speed. There's no digital readout for it at all. We've got 2 segment LED screens on either side of it, one for your tacho and the other showing various bits of trip information which you can cycle through. Steering wheel, pretty much a standard Mazda unit, although here it's been pared back a little bit because there's no adaptive cruise control. We've just got regular cruise control. The seats are fabric, there's full manual adjustment, and it's actually very comfortable, even for somebody my size. I'm 190 centimeters tall. I've got no issues fitting in or getting into or out of this car. The seating position is actually really good too. It's nice and low in the cabin, feels kind of sporty. Visibility, yeah, not so great out the front because I really can't see the bonnet at all. It just kind of drops away completely, but it's only a small car, so you've got a fair idea of the footprint of this car, but visibility in every other direction is fine, especially through the rear vision mirror. You can see everything very clearly there indeed. The back seat is not really a place for adults my size. Kids probably won't be overly happy back there either on long trips because there's no USB charging, there's no air vents, and yeah, it's a bit of a squash, to be honest. It's not a very big car, not really designed for family road trips. So driving this car, obviously, as I said before, it's not hugely powerful. There are times when I've had my foot flat on the floor in second gear going uphill, and it makes a lot of noise and feels like it's not going terribly quickly. But, you know, this is a small city car. It's fuel efficient. It's designed to be zippy and get you from A to B in a hurry. So, you know, it's never going to be a hugely powerful car to drag people off at the lights in. So this car comes with iStop, which pretty much all Mazdas do. It's a system to turn the engine off at red lights in order to save fuel, but I've never seen it in a manual before. And this is actually really quite interesting. So it goes off as you'd expect, but as soon as your foot goes on the clutch again to put it back into gear to pull away, the engine comes back on. And yeah, it actually works really well. I think it works better in this car than it does in some automatics. Having said that though, I still do turn it off. And speaking of when this car is stopped, it just does feel a little bit rough, like it's idling a little bit roughly. I don't quite know why it's doing that. So the car that this probably most directly competes with is the Kia Picanto. I reviewed the GT model a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it. It was a manual and it was so much fun to throw into corners. And the Mazda2 feels perhaps a little more solid than that car. It's probably equally fun to drive, not being able to do it directly back to back. It's a bit hard to say, but I do recall having a really good time driving the Picanto. I don't think the gear shifting was quite as good in that car as it is in this one, but this is a lot of fun to drive. The Mazda2 just loves cornering, and it is so much fun to do it in a manual. I don't think it would be nearly this much fun in an automatic. Not to mention that would probably rob the engine of a fair bit of power too, and there's not that much of it to go around. And in terms of safety gear, for an entry-level city car, it's actually really well equipped. There's blind spot monitors in the wing mirrors, there's lane keep assist and rear cross traffic alert. So a very long time ago when I bought my first car, which was a brand new 1999 Toyota Starlet when I was 21, don't ask me what I was thinking. It was about $13,000, $14,000 drive away, and it had 2 doors. It was an entry-level model and filled pretty much the same brief as this car. But it's just interesting how worlds apart the two cars are. Now, admittedly, this Mazda2 costs about double what the Starlet did, but you know, given inflation and the amount of technology in this car and the amount of safety gear that's in it, but you can see where the money goes, and I feel a lot safer driving this car than I ever did driving the Starlet.